Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow your business. In this episode, my guest is TJ Walia. TJ is a digital transformation executive. He's a productivity coach, and he's been helping business leaders to scale their companies and grow their revenue. As business leaders, we all have to deal with the workplace stress and also productivity challenges. TJ shared his journey, how he overcome his health challenges and also that improved his productivity. And now he's training people and coaching people to not only deal with the health challenges, also improve their productivity and manage stress at a workplace environment. If you like this content, don't forget to send me your feedback and like and subscribe to this channel. Until next time, please welcome TJ Walia. Hi guys, welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today my guest is TJ Walia. TJ, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time today.
Gurmeet, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our discussion, TJ. First, a couple of years back, when we talked, you were at the Microsoft. You had a senior role at the Microsoft. So walk us through your journey. What happens, since that? What you were doing at Microsoft, and walk us through your story afterwards.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when we last spoke, I was actually leading and running the IoT business for Microsoft Canada, which was an amazing role. Through my journey at Microsoft. Now, maybe I'll give you a little bit, background on it. From university, I actually got pulled to work for Microsoft, and so that was a challenge. Being East Indian background and family, talking about challenges of you can't leave university just yet. You got to finish it before you go start working.
Yeah.
And I remember having this conversation with my parents, and I said, listen, like if I'm going to go to university to get an amazing job, I'm getting that now. So what's stopping me from doing this? Big, back and forth at home, but I still made that decision to go work for Microsoft at that time. I pursued my university part-time. And part of that was because my education, a lot of it was self-taught. So computer science, I started at the age of 13. I started poking around with technology and got really passionate about it, started building programs and things like that. So for me, I was very deliberate about the decisions I was making, Gurmeet. I was very clear on what I wanted to do, even as a kid. So when I got the opportunity to work for Microsoft, I jumped on it and I just grabbed the bull by the horns and I got to learn a lot through that journey. I started with our enterprise services group. So it was all really support related. And my role was really helping Microsoft Premier and enterprise customers with their technical challenges. That got me a lot of knowledge through that journey. So it was a lot of, especially being a kid in university still, getting that kind of exposure was amazing for me. So that I think really helped me leapfrog my career to a great extent. And then I when working at Microsoft, I worked with a lot of different organizations, a lot of different partners, big and small, amazing people throughout it. But going back to where you and I kind of connected, it was running the IoT business for Canada. So within that realm, I was actually exposed to a lot of innovative solutions that were being built by existing corporate clients as well as new startups coming into the market, and they wanted to bring out new solutions and new ways of doing things. So I had exposure to all of that, which was quite exciting. After that, I basically, decided, seeing all these startups doing their own things, I said, there's something there that kind of got me excited. So I thought I'd, delve into my own adventures of, building my own company and from the ground up and going through that exposure and experience.
So talk about a little bit of your journey. You were doing very well at the Microsoft. And then you had a health issues. If you walk us through your story, what inspires the whole change in your career, and share that with the audience a little bit. I think that people can draw a lot of value from the discussion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So back in 2014, and this was probably at about the 5 or 6 year mark of my journey at Microsoft, I was exhausted. I was dealing with burnout, but I didn't realize that's what it was. I was kind of just hitting it hard every single day. It's like, I've got this. Compromising the amount of time or the work-life balance I'm supposed to be having with the family, with my friends. It was all about career. And in 2014 or so, I was at a client meeting in Richmond Hill, and we were just dealing with some of the executives there and the normal day-to-day. This is what we're doing, this is what we're pitching, this is the conversation we're having about technology, their challenges. I actually wasn't feeling well that day for whatever reason, and I asked to excuse myself from that conversation. And as soon as I got off the table, The last thing I remember is hitting the ground for me. I collapsed.
Wow.
I don't know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I just blanked out. It happened so fast that I had no time to react, no time for guide, no time for assistance or anything. And when I opened my eyes, everyone's around me, and I'm not a big guy, so some of the guys picked me up and put me on one of the benches and laid me down. That was the beginning of my journey with mental health and anxiety, which I had no idea existed before that moment. And at that point, I realized that this was not the way I wanted to live my life. I had to change the way I was doing things. I had to be very deliberate about it, as I was with everything else and career choices. So, I'm going to keep this story short there, but through those 6 months of that chaos that I was dealing with at home with my family, I started revamping the way I did things. And so taking some time off from Microsoft, I actually came back. I put and I applied this new way of doing the work I do day to day, managing my time, managing my schedule, managing my activities, and then cutting them off to, hey, this is enough for today, and then I'm going to focus on my personal health. I actually was promoted within 8 months of coming back. So
After that, when you came back to,
when I came
wow.
back, so going from the darkest time of my life where I didn't want to be around family, I couldn't do work. You wouldn't believe I would walk into a client and I'd be shaking on the inside.
Wow.
I lost all that confidence. It was just gone just like that in a split second, because the only thing my mind could ever lock into was, what happens if I faint and pass out now? What happens if I faint and pass out now? It entirely prohibited me from focusing on the content, focusing on the work, focusing on the discussion. Like, I couldn't even hear what the person in front of me was saying.
Yeah, because there was so much going on.
I was so overwhelmed with what was happening. So I started working out. I would hit the gym at 5:30 in the morning, right? And that was important for me because that was the only time I actually got, because of the kids, the family, school, work, everything else. I started going to the gym at 5:30. I started meditating. So I started spending more time for myself and saying, okay, I need to really gain back that control. And I found that, that spirituality aspect of it, that meditation really helped. And it wasn't any, religious chants or nothing like that. It was really just honing in on who I am and just
time for
focusing
yourself.
on that. And that's all it is.
Yeah.
We look at meditation as it's a right way and a wrong way. I still meditate today, even, before, on a daily basis, I'll still meditate and spend some time, but it's really just focusing on my breathing and just letting my thoughts go, right? And that's what really helped me get out of that. And so, as I was saying, within 8 months, I was actually promoted to a senior in that same role, which for 5 years I hadn't been. So, going through this dark time, finding a new way of doing things, and then all of a sudden, I'm like, okay, this is working for me. Once I started developing, better strategies on that, and I got it formalized and I got it down to a science where I'm like, okay, this is how I have to work on a day-to-day basis, and it's working. I started sharing that with others at Microsoft, and I started, talking to my peers and say, hey, if you're dealing with this, let me show you how I can help you in changing the way we do our day-to-day work, routines. That went from, maybe 2 or 3 people here and there, just, evangelizing and sharing that message, to just back in 2021, we did a segment. I had a request come in, and we had over 5,000 people join that conversation.
Wow.
And it was just, it was, incredible. The feedback I've gotten back from people has been, and I've been sharing some videos on LinkedIn around this. It's been life-changing, they've been saying. I mean, it was life-changing for me. I already knew that. But to share that same tactic and the same, techniques for others to say, TJ, like, this has been life-changing. I've had people, and I'm talking about C-level executives in organizations, say to me that they're friendlier individuals now. And at first, when I heard that feedback, it threw me off. I'm like, well, I'm teaching you how to be productive. I'm not teaching you how to be friendlier. So, what's the story there? And she said to me, she was a CIO. She said to me, when she's going to events, she's no longer pulling out her phone and checking what's in there. She goes, I'm caught up. I know I'm in control over all the stuff that I have to do. She goes, when I'm spending time with my kids, I'm no longer, heads down my phone. If they're playing hockey, I'm watching them play hockey and I'm participating and not saying, hey, the kid is occupied for 30 minutes or 40 minutes. Now I can go check my email. They're not doing that anymore. So they found that to be life-changing. And that's kind of something I developed out of my own stresses and burnout experience that I had. And that's what I'm doing now. So as I've left Microsoft, I've decided to help other organizations, other corporate leaders and executives understand the importance of managing their time effectively and getting more done. So things like freeing up an extra hour to 2 hours or even 3 hours a day, just because they're now aware of exactly what has to be done, in what timeline, how effective it has to be, and then working on just those items and leaving all the other stuff till later on, and prioritizing accordingly. So that's kind of where my journey has been, Gurmeet.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot to learn from. First of all, thank you for sharing your story. I think you've gone through a lot, but I think a lot of people can relate to this story, TJ. So I want to make sure that we go step by step. So let's understand. So when you were going through the stressful work, whether it's longer hours or just the stress of the work itself, was there any symptoms that you could, I'm sure a lot of people are going through a similar situation as well. They're working, especially with the COVID, people working longer hours,
Yeah.
or they just have a lot of workload that they need to deal with. There's a lot of stress, health related, financially or just work related stress. So was there any symptoms that you could go back and say, listen, these were the symptoms, I should have paid attention to these signs, that were somebody else who watching or listening to us, they can also pay attention and they can pick on some of those things?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, Gurmeet. The one thing, so from a symptoms perspective, there was nothing as in, am I feeling faint or I'm feeling exhausted? There was nothing like that. The one thing that did stick out though was not getting enough sleep. I knew I wasn't getting enough sleep, and I think a lot of people already know they're not getting enough sleep. They're hitting the snooze button, the alarms, just to get out of bed. That was huge. I would go to bed at anywhere from 1 to 2 o'clock, and I'd be up at 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, right? So you can imagine doing that on a daily basis repeatedly. It caught up to me, right? And I thought, hey, I'm fine. I'm my energy levels are fine. So, it's the first initial couple of, hours that I'm kind of groggy. I'll drink a couple of coffees. I'm good. All of that is what I didn't pay attention to. I thought, oh, well, I can have coffee and I'm fine and I'm great. Or I'd have something, a sugary snack, just to kind of boost myself up as well. But this was all artificial, right? If you think about what I was doing to myself, since I would say 2016, I haven't had coffee, right? I don't have the need for coffee. I don't need to use these other foods or products to wake me up or keep me alert. I wake up on my own, right? And from a coffee perspective, it does, it can trigger anxiety in certain cases as well. So for me, it's just, I'd rather just avoid it, and if I don't need it, right? So that's, I think to answer your question again, the trigger was really this lack of sleep and knowing that it wasn't there. I became very religious about my sleep afterwards. If I didn't get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, I would take a nap during the day. I would tell my peers, I would tell my my management team that, hey, I'm out for an extra little bit because I have to take care of myself. And I was very transparent about that. And I think that's what also supported as well. My leadership team at work was really involved in terms of understanding, hey, what was going on and how can we support? And that communication was key. A lot of people are I think would be hesitant to share that information. I was not. I shared it with my family. My family knew, so they knew that if TJ needed some space, here it is. Like, let's let him do his thing. And the same would apply at work. If there was a meeting that I had to miss because I wasn't 100%, I would actually open up and say, hey, listen, I can't do this. Let's reschedule because I'm not, I'm not up to it today. And I think that really helps. So being aware of those things and being aware of our own health, we're usually afraid of disappointing others and by saying, hey, I can't do this. But I think the bigger disappointment is when we don't show up 100%. If we're only showing up 20 or 30% of who we are, it's really doing the other person a disservice as well. It's not giving them the value they're looking for in our engagement. So it's best to show up and be honest and transparent.
Yeah. No, it's sleep. My recent research, also I'm looking at sleep is one of the major reasons for any mental health challenges, right? So there's so many research, so many studies out there that, sleep is one of the issue. So when you were going through this, TJ, sleep is definitely one of the challenge that, you deal with it. But how big was the change? How long it took you to make all those changes in your lifestyle and your diet and that, the way you conducted your business? These are big changes that you made, especially sleeping on time, food changes, health changes. You can't just do it overnight. I think a lot of people struggle with those changes over time. Was it a big struggle, or how long did that take
No,
to?
it's for me, and this is one thing that I pride myself on is I have a really strong willpower. So if I decide that I'm done with a certain food or anything, it's instant. Like say, it didn't take me time to get off of coffee. It was just one day, it was done. Sleep, same thing. I'm changing my habit as of today, done. Starting the gym, tomorrow I'm going at 5:30 in the morning, done. Like for me, I'm very deliberate, but I think we all can do this once we've convinced ourselves. It's when we can't convince ourselves. And I don't want it to sound like I'm perfect and I've been able to do this. Over the years, after I got back on track, hitting the gym at 5:30 was more challenging. I had that desperate need at the time, Gurmeet, to say I have to make this change, otherwise things are not going to get better.
Yeah,
I made that change. Now, if you were to ask me to go to the gym at 5:30, I'd be like, maybe not. Let's do it at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or something later, right? So we have those leniencies within us, but it takes sometimes something very drastic to happen to make that change. So if we want to do it gradually, we have to build the habits. And so those kind of things I've changed into habits in terms of, how am I checking email? How am I responding? I'm going to respond right away. I had a habit because I was in the support world with Microsoft Enterprise customers, responding right away and getting things out and saying, okay, this is, what needs to be addressed. I had to change that habit to say, well, you know what, this can wait based on the priority level. I'll slot a certain time to allocate some time to this and attend to it later, but let me focus on my priorities, right? Those were habits that took a little longer for me to build, but they were significant, right? It's just like any changes that we do, you have to repeat it. So constant reminders, not having my device by my bedside. That was another big one as well. I'd get up, I'd check my email, check my news. You're waking up with negativity and tasks and work to do. I put it in a different room entirely. I said, I'm not going to touch this thing, right?
Yeah.
So instead, I would take a sticky note, and on that sticky note, write the top 2 or 3 things that I was going to get done in the morning, which could be hit the gym, focus on meditation or any of those things. I would then basically attend to those first before even checking my device. So some habits you have to force yourself. You have to have the support of those people around you as well. I made sure my wife knew, like, keep this device away from me. Even to this day, when I'm actually in my office working, I'll leave my phone on Do Not Disturb in a whole different room in the house. I say, I'm not going to go back to this, because when you have to get some focus time done, you have to have that focus time. So all notifications, alerts, they're all turned off. It's like, let me get some work done. So that's, those are the changes I've made, and they're hard. They're not easy, right? That device.
Well, we don't realize that, TJ, that, the first responder, whether it's a service providers or whoever is, nurses are the same way, IT service providers the same way. Whoever's in a first lineup for a service provider, we don't realize how stressful that is. If you're not even IT service provider or any service provider, whether it's a SaaS or nurses, the first call you're going to get, you never get a happy call. You're only going to get a call for the problem, right? Exactly. The reason somebody calling you because there's some problem they want you to solve, right? So all call comes in a form of, not a negative, but in a form of requesting some help from you, take some energy from you. So you got to help, find a way how to manage, how to stay positive, manage energy. I think this is a big part. And that's why a lot of stress is in these the jobs as well, right? Somebody have to pick up the phone and respond to and fix somebody's problem. And I always tell guys, this is it's a stress is a part of this role. You just got to figure out, you got to learn how to manage the stress and get better at it over time, right? And we all find a different ways of managing the stress and getting better at that. I think your way of doing it is perfectly, I think that is the right way of doing it, focusing on yourself and taking the time, and controlling when you want to respond to that, when you're not going to respond to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, some of the stuff I was dealing with was, really high profile customers, and an outage and having one of those is not just an outage in a small, situation. It's business down. So they're losing, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, by the hour. So it's highly stressful. So you're kind of on the phone with your C-level executives. You're on the phone with the internal executives at Microsoft, right? You're trying to get things sorted out. There's a lot of that goes into it. But at the same time, those situations you definitely want to prioritize. You don't want to let those go. But if you're prioritizing everything and one of those comes in, then you're overloaded, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you got it.
dividing that time of saying, hey, this isn't a priority issue. I'm going to save my energy for something else. And there've been days where I've worked from, 6 or 7 a.m. until, midnight.
Wow.
And it's because there's an outage and there's a situation that we have to stay on top of. And these are, local organizations that you and I both know, but it's making sure that they're up and running. These could be government entities. They could be, anything that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, but ensuring that they're operational. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes that we, as a end consumer don't necessarily see from day to day.
Well, they have a big impact on their business, right? So of course they're stressed out, when they're calling you, and definitely you get stressed because you're involved in that. Exactly. So it's all parties share that stress, but you just have to learn how to get better at it. Because there's going to be somebody, if you have a large, portfolio of a client, somebody's going to be going through this stuff all the time, right? You just have to learn how to handle some of that stuff.
Exactly. It's about self-management, self-regulation. I think that's the biggest thing, right? And sometimes you have to disconnect. And even in those situations, I would disconnect and say, hey team, like I'm done for now. Let's connect back in about an hour. Let's all break. Let's all, do what we need to take care of everything at home or family or whatnot. And then let's get back on and just make sure everything's moving the way it's supposed to be. But you can delegate different responsibilities to different individuals. And that's part of that management as well. But some of my peers and some people I've seen in the industry will stay engaged throughout. But it's so important for us to disconnect a little bit and to let the mind rest.
Yeah.
And one thing I find is when the mind rests, you get better ideas and solutions as well, right? Instead of just, burning it out. So there's other advantages to it as well.
Did you find that even though you hold back, you cut some time or take some time off for your own care, the productivity, the work you put out, it doesn't go down. It goes other way around, right? It increases.
It does. Our mind never rests, right? So when we have a problem that we're thinking of, even if we're focused somewhere else, the mind is still processing something. You'll be like, oh, an idea comes to you and it's like, oh, this is what we could try. So sometimes we have to let, the different part of the brain do the processing as well, not just when we're focused on something. So and this is why the saying of, you should sleep on something, right? On a concept is because let the mind do its work. And, by the morning, by the next day, you're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't send that message out, or maybe I shouldn't, do something in a certain way, or maybe I should, try a different angle or approach on this, right? So our mind, like we haven't uncovered, the possibilities of, what the brain really can do and what it's capable of, but just leaving it alone from time to time as well is just as important as using it and occupying it.
Yeah. So, you've been sharing this information with the Microsoft, and now you're trying to help a lot of other business leaders as well, TJ. What kind of feedback are you getting? And what, do you finding people going through similar challenges or a little bit different challenges? What's been the feedback so far?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started teaching or sharing my learnings at Microsoft, I found that I wasn't alone in this. Initially, I thought I was just me, right? Because that's how we look at it and say, maybe I'm just the only one going through it. Just because people are not talking about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And as I started talking about it, more people came to me and said, hey, I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with this. Can you help with this? I remember a scenario, Gurmeet. There was a gentleman who's working alongside me, a friend of mine, and he had a newborn child at home, and it was a long weekend we were going into, and he looked stressed. And I said, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, well, you must be excited going home and spending time with the baby and getting to interact and engage. How's that going? He's like, I don't have time for the baby. He goes, I'm so worked up. Like, this is insane. Like, I have so much work to do. And if I don't do it, I'm going to get in trouble. And it's just, it's not easy. And I pulled him aside and I said, listen, it was Friday. I remember it was Friday evening. I'm like, I know you're going to go home right now. I'm going to take an hour or 2 hours of your time right now. And it was about an hour is what we ended up doing. I said, I want to actually help you get control of what you're doing. We sat down in one of the boardrooms, and we shared our screen, or he shared his screen, and I actually navigated him through all the changes he needed to do in his inbox, just from an Outlook perspective. And Gurmeet, after that hour that I spent with him, I asked him, I said, how do you feel now? And he goes, I feel so much lighter, so much relieved. And he actually went home and actually spent time with his newborn, that the way he should have been doing, right? But just work just overtakes us. And that impact was just so drastic. And that's what the impact that I've been sharing with people. And it's not about, I'm doing their work for them or I'm doing their emails for them. It's about helping them clear out the clutter and know what's important and what's not. Once you have that identified and you say, I've got 2 things I've got to work on before this weekend or during this weekend or for Monday, you can allocate your time accordingly. If your inbox is full of, and imagine a cluttered desk, right, of papers and documents, you don't know where everything is. You can't remember where things are. You don't know what you have to work on, right? So that's all I helped him do. And it changed the way he operated just through that, right? And that's what I had done for myself, is getting that clarity on what needs to be focused on. And that's what I've been providing. So again, to answer your question, we're not alone. There's a lot of people that are actually now reaching out to me and saying, hey, can you help my team with, this as well? And one of the measures I usually take is saying, like, are you comfortable sharing your inbox with your manager? Are you comfortable turning your laptop around or your computer around and say, hey, manager, supervisor, executive, take a look at what my inbox looks like? Most people are not, because they feel that they're going to be judged on being, not organized, right? There's going to be clutter, there's going to be chaos, and that's going to be in some way a reflection of who they are. It's not, right? It's not necessarily that. And those executives feel the same way when I ask them to show their desk, their inbox to their leadership team. But the reality is we're all stressed and facing the same challenges. It's how do we overcome them? How do we get the tools and the resources to overcome that? And that's what I had developed over the years on, this is how we do it. And now they're comfortable. Even having the conversation of, how many unread emails do you have? And I've seen, 60,000, 100,000. Yeah, like I've seen a ton. And I've seen some people with just 200 and they're like, I can't manage this, right? So but what they're doing is, to even get at 200, they're spending all day just trying to keep it down. And that's not the goal, right? The goal isn't, I call, there's terminologies in the industry about inbox zero. It's not about getting it at zero. To me, it's about getting control, getting that sanity and getting that understanding of, where things are and what I have to work on and what I have to prioritize. And getting those tools is essential more than anything else.
Yeah, especially the era where phone just beeps all day, right? There's social media distraction. There is your apps are distracting. There's updates on an app or your emails coming through, and there's so much feeds coming through in many different channels, right? There's so much happening all the time. You just gotta control your time. If you let your technology control your time, you have nothing left, right? So it just happens happen all the time. So is there more of organization? Is it simply pausing all those apps and nothing beeps in your phone? Are those some of those? I think there was one book. I think Microsoft uses near well. I'm not sure. Undistracted. No. Yeah. So I'll send. It's a great book. He was talking about the technology as well. The same thing. How do you get a control on when you have so many notifications? Just shut down all the notifications so you don't have all the notification comes up, right? So so you got to look at that way.
No, absolutely. I think it's a combination of both, right? So for me, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, I'm on all the social media platforms, but my notifications are turned off. It's only the ones that I need from my business perspective or for me to be productive, right? So my business is focused on LinkedIn, and that's where my business comes in from. That's where my leads are coming in from, my engagements. So that's the only one that I have notifications enabled on in certain ways. What type of notifications I'm going to have. Even at work, I would have email notifications turned off, right? So imagine, because every time you get an email notification, you're distracted by, oh, what email came in? What is it? Is it important? Your train of thought gets derailed, right? We use Teams, or we used to use we use Teams at Microsoft. I'm not there anymore. So, but Teams would have notifications come up, right? Or Slack or any other tools. I would turn all that off and say, I will check it on my terms unless I'm mentioned. If someone deliberately calls me out, I'll get that notification so that I can go in and see, okay, what's going on, and keep that conversation going if it's important. If it's not, I'll pull myself out again and go right back to what I need to. So being deliberate about, when you're engaged, how you're engaged is critical. If someone wanted to get in touch with me and it was urgent, well, they have my cell number, right? Yeah, they know how to get engaged. They'll contact me, right? If they're messaging me on Instagram and saying, hey, how's it going? Or check out this post, probably not urgent. I don't have to stop my existing work, to go check that out and attend to that. There are times when I don't respond on Instagram for weeks, and my friends, and they know this now, they're in that habit, right? And I'll go in maybe, on a particular day and go through and respond to a few of them here and there. But if they want to get in touch with me, LinkedIn is the way to go, right? They know they'll get in front of me on LinkedIn or text me directly or call me. So having those verticals for yourself to know where you're going to prioritize is essential. And that's that clarity I was talking about as well.
Yeah, I know a couple of business leaders I talk to. They have a certain set hours. From 2 to 3, I'm going to respond to emails, and everything else I'm not going to respond to. Right. So they'll allocate time that this is the only time I will respond to any emails. Before and after, their staff knows, their team knows he's not going to respond to email. If you need something, you just give him a call.
Yeah.
Right?
No, absolutely.
Sorry. No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say absolutely, and that's essential, right? Because if you can block out your time to say, okay, this is email time. Now this is, I'm going to focus on these tasks, and that's how you get things done. Otherwise, you're going to be living in your inbox all day, right? Because there's always something coming in. Sorry, you're going to say something.
No. So learning the skill set is one thing, TJ, and then if you're running a team of people, you're building a team or trying to scale a company, you got to transfer these skills to your staff as well, right? You got to train your people as well. So how do business leaders go about, learning for myself is one thing, but, how I'm going to translate that into my, transfer that skill set to my staff as well, because it's not only me, it's important for me. It's also important for my staff, for them to get better. That's how, companies can make some progress.
Absolutely. And I think transparency is key, right? As a leader, if someone can go in and tell their team that we're bringing in this expert to kind of talk about this, we're going to be in this on a team. So instead of leaders doing it as a one-on-one and saying, hey, let me, get these little secrets in here, let's share it with the team because everyone's struggling. When that entire team is productive, Gurmeet, that leader shines. That leader is the one that's hitting those numbers, right? Those that he's accountable for, or she's accountable for. That leader is the one that is excelling in the area or their domain that they're working in. The quality of work from each of those individuals goes up. Why? Because you're no longer getting, a product in just in time. I've talked to many leaders and I'd say, are you struggling with this challenge? Like, no, all our assignments are, and our deadlines are met. We never have an issue. And the question isn't about the deadline. We will hit our deadlines. We always do. It's the quality of work that goes into that product or that output that is questionable, that we can't measure. And if you start giving people the right amount of time and say, you're not focusing on anything else, you're focusing just on this, that quality of work goes up. And that's what changes and has impact. If I'm going to submit something to you and I'm just going to do it last minute, sure, you'll get the product. You'll get what it is that's submitted. Is it an individual's best work? So to those leaders, it's not about just hitting those deadlines and just getting, and I'm getting everything and my team's not complaining. They're not going to complain to you because they're going to come out as, are they nagging? Are they upset about their job? It's not about that. It's about giving them that freedom to say, what do you need help with to do your best work? And sometimes they don't know what that is, but getting extra time is always essential.
I see. So in quality work, I take your point, it's very critical for business leaders. Before COVID, we had the way we measure productivity was 8 to 5. Somebody comes in office 8 o'clock and they leave at 5 o'clock. They're sitting in a chair. We measure the productivity. We know from COVID that those lines got blurry. Now people are working a little bit longer hours from home. Sometimes they take a break in the middle of the hours, whatever they got to do. So it's a different way of measuring. So what you're saying that in quality goes up, right? So, but how do business leaders put some sort of a measure on that? Hey, how do I measure productivity? How do I know people are, producing the work? So yeah, quality I can test, but how do I measure that against that? If somebody's on a payroll, how do I make sure that this person's, doing what they're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, it's it's an interesting question, right? And there's not one answer that goes into it. I've seen organizations implement solutions that are tracking what a user's behavior is on the machine, right? Those are trust-related issues that could come out of that as well, right? Because the employee now thinks, well, my employer doesn't trust me, right? So are they now thinking of what are they doing, or are they deliberately putting up the right windows for the screen capture tools to be capturing, certain data? So there's aspects of that. The type of work that we're doing, and this isn't, one size fits all because there's so many different types of roles and, and activities and job functions. But I think having that trust and relationship between a supervisor, a manager, an executive, and their employee is essential. I'm a believer of asking people to do something, not telling them to do something. When you ask someone to do something, they're going to have a different perspective on how to do it, right? When you tell someone to do it, they'll do it. But again, that quality, that output may or may not be there, right? So I think, it's a hard one to answer per se, especially on a measurement perspective. I personally, when I'm working with my employees, even in the startups now, I don't track what they do. I don't, look at and say, how many hours did you spend today? It's all trust-based. If they're working remotely, I'm more focused on the output. In my head, I have an idea of this output is worth this much of time, right? If an employee comes in and says, I've spent, the past 3 weeks on this and it was only a 2-day task, that's questionable, right? Then it's like, okay, what happened? Is the employee missing something? Was my communication not clear enough? Did I not set the right expectations? That becomes my problem rather than their problem, right? On the flip side, if the task is supposed to take about 2 to 3 weeks, but they've done it in half a day, right? Again, where was I not clear, right? Yeah. Is the amount and quantity of work, the depth of research, what are we missing? So that's how I approach it, as opposed to saying, well, you're going to work 8 hours on this and give me the output, right? Those 8 hours, someone who's a pro could be a half an hour. Yeah. Someone who's new learning this could be 16 hours of work, right? So it's really subjective from that perspective. Even when my role at Microsoft, after the amount of experience I had, someone new coming in would take countless numbers of hours to, respond with the right answer or with the research, whereas that's something that was like a 2-minute thing for me, right? So how do we measure that, right? Yeah, so that's where that seniority, the experience, all that comes in. But it's the assessment on the executive's part to say, what is this really worth? And how much time and effort is required? And if they don't know, that's a fair ask as well, right? And say, hey, I'm not sure how long this is going to take. Let me know what this looks like. But it's that dialogue, it's that conversation, it's that trust that you have to build with those team members.
Yeah, I think instead of measuring a time, we just have to look at different ways, measuring a quality of work and the output of it and the result of it, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's a conversation I had with a lot of business leaders, especially in a COVID. That's how they start looking into, because that time, measuring the time and turns into productivity, that's no longer relevant anymore. I think the time we are in right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, again, it depends on the job function and the role and what the individual is supposed to do. If they're supposed to be out on the road, fixing problems and working with clients, that's different than someone who's actually, building a strategy for something right behind the scenes. So there's different elements of it where you're actually engaging one-to-one with people or with teams versus, well, I've got some me time to focus on this strategy and this roadmap and this build out. That's different. So each one of those is different, but each of those supervisor executives are going to have context within their realm. So they'll have a better understanding of how to measure those aspects.
Okay. So what can business leaders do, TJ? They may have a staff, especially what we've gone through for the last couple of years, right? They have a staff, they're going through same stressful challenges as well, whether it's a health stress, whether it's a financial, family stress, all sorts of stress that people are dealing with. And they're working on disconnect environment. We work in a virtual, hybrid environment where some people are working from home, some from office. But you gotta help people out. All business leaders, they want to help out their staff. Whatever they're going through challenges. So what can they do to help out so their staff doesn't get to the point where your journey started, right? So they don't get to that place. So how could they be any helpful to the staff?
I think the biggest thing is making themselves available to their staff on this front. They're usually available for, hey, if you have questions, come about the task they're working on, reach out to me. Maybe, and one thing that we that I really enjoyed that Microsoft was setting from a culture perspective was about a well-being aspect, right? Starting every meeting off and saying, how's everyone doing, right? If anyone has any challenges, any questions, reach out to me. Either we can have a conversation as a team, or we'll have it as one-on-one, right? Reach out to me. I think fostering that kind of culture in an organization is really helpful. It shows people that they're valued. Right? They're not just coming in and punching in and out and they're done for the day. It shows them they're valued, they're cared for, right? It also shows them that they have a avenue to go to in case something is there, right? Rather than the whole concept of fearing a supervisor or a boss or a manager, right? And there, that fear aspect, it's 2023. It doesn't work anymore, right? People leave jobs, they'll change, they have different options, right? It's not that same environment that we can go in with. Instead, it's trust, and leaders that form those trusting relationships are the ones that are whose teams are more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. A lot of people coming from universities, they're looking for that. And, I go through a lot of, recruiting processes where, I hire a lot of young talent. They are looking for that aspect where they're looking for a leader who can understand them, who can sit down with them and help them out with the journey, because they're starting from that environment where we just talk about, right?
Absolutely. And they're hungry to learn, right? So, and I've worked with a lot of university recruits as well, especially my startup, when I'm building things out in the planning aspect of it. I bring them in on those conversations and say, listen, this is essential for you to learn. Let's have you sit in here, right? Obviously, they're respecting the organization's confidentiality as well, and that's a trust I'm putting in them. But at the same time, like, this is invaluable experience that you're going to get from this dialogue. Yeah. And I've brought them into conversations and meetings where we're talking about strategy. They're sitting there silently and listening, but I will turn to them and say, what are your thoughts on this? Right? Because they bring a different perspective. Yeah. They bring a different view on things that I might not be seeing. Right? So getting their input is essential in those cases as well. And they absolutely feel valued.
Wow, very interesting. So business leaders that, who are watching, who are listening or watching, we got a lot of on our plate. Definitely, we got to scale the companies. We got to build the companies. We got a lot of blind spot. Not, if I'm so busy with that trying to scale a business, I'm not going to be able to pay attention to some of these, a lot of the stuff, you items you mentioned. How could you be any help to them? How do you help them out? I'm always looking for experts who can show me some of our blind spot and help me to deal with some of those blind spot as well. So if you talk about yourself, how do you help out business leaders in that case?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is exactly what I'm doing. So I'm setting up sessions with executives and their teams, essentially, to go in. It could be a power lunch and learn. So in 1 hour, let me show you how to take control over certain elements that gets a little more control. And then we've got a workshop that's almost like a 5 or 6 hour workshop that I go in, teach them everything that they need. So they're going to be dedicating almost about a day of their time to the session, but from that point on, they're in control. So it's not like it's something that you're going to, eventually learn. It's, I give you all the tools and the resources you need right there and then, so you can start applying them. Some people gravitate towards the, certain aspects of it. I don't go in and say, you're going to change your entire way of doing work, right? That is the absolute wrong way to do it. Everyone has a way of doing things. I actually go in and tweak and modify those for them to be a lot more efficient. So the learning curve is very small. So they get to apply these little things in their normal day-to-day routines. And it's like, okay, I'm making these small changes, and now they're making more efficient. They're getting more time back. They feel better. They feel more in control, and they're productive all at the same time. So the company I'm setting up is not just on the productivity side, it's all relating to efficiencies and effectiveness. Even on the AI side that we're getting into as well. So AI, data, IoT, machine learning, we're going to be providing resources who can help organizations move the needle on those projects, right? So how do you get more efficient and more effective on those? Getting the right people through the door to be able to help with those is essential. A lot of leaders don't know what the direction is, what the path is, how do we get there? Helping clear those and helping them navigate through those waters and helping clear the path for them is what we're working towards there. So it's all about efficiencies and being effective.
So how do we help our people when you work in a hybrid environment, some working at home, some working in an office? How do you get this, this help available to them when they're home or when they work in an office?
Yeah, so I mean, I can do the sessions through a call as well. So through Zoom, Teams, right? So we can do that. So whichever tool your organization is using, we can do it through that. Even with the session I did, with over 5,000 people, was all a Teams live event, right? So it was a one-way communication. These are the challenges. This is how we deal with them. This is how we handle them. And the ones that are a little bit more interactive, then those, it becomes more of a workshop type of model where we can actually go and make those changes that day and start applying them.
Very interesting. Hey, you're sharing your story, your personal journey, TJ, but you're helping a lot of people out. I'm sure a lot of people are in a similar situation, or they already gone through it, or they going towards that. So I'm sure you're helping a lot of people in different places in their journey. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I learned so much from your story as well. What to look for. Health is always, you got to take care of health. If your health is not to the level where it should be, how are you going to help out other people, right? It's an old way of saying it. So where can people find you? How can they connect with you, TJ?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can reach out with me on LinkedIn. My URL that I've got is a shortened URL. It's aka.ms/TJ. Easy to remember. They can get me on LinkedIn directly. And from there, if they want to reach out and connect, I'm happy to have a conversation with them and see how we can help their organizations be more productive and do more.
Yeah, I'm going to include the link below the video as well. People can click a button and Perfect. They can connect with you. I definitely encourage all business leaders who are watching or listening, reach out to you, connect with you, have a discussion with you. Who knows where the discussion can take you, and see what opportunities are there, right? So, that's how we learn. That's how we collaborate. That's how we, get better. So I'm going to include a link below. I encourage everybody to just, click a link, connect with you, and go from there. Have a conversation. You learn from conversation quite a bit every time, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, Gurmeet. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.